How we doing, everyone? Tom Grisafi, Agbo Media, Agbo Podcast, Agbo Trading, coming to you live from my kitchen. We got another guy who's in his kitchen. I couldn't take working in the basement anymore. Now, we took a little break from doing the Mike Sands cattle podcast because cattle were moving limit up, limit down, limit this, and it was just overwhelming. But we're back at it. We brought the one and only Mr. Mike Sands. He's there. They got him locked up in Nesvik's office. He is in Memphis, Tennessee. I actually got to cut bread with him the other day. He was very well behaved when others were uh, staying out a little late. Mr. Mike went home early, and we did have a good time. That was fun to visit with you, Mike.
Tommy, at my age, the recovery times from those nights out are so much longer than they used to be. I got to limit that.
Yeah, but when you do, weren't you and I talking about Killian's Red?
Absolutely, we were. That's
Yeah,
that's
because
always the fallback.
I said, what do you like drink? You said like a red beer, and I said like Killian's Red, and you go, absolutely. All right. Well, when we talk cattle, we're going to need a beer. Let's get right in the show. These are your show notes. This is Mr. Mike Sands, MBS Research out of Memphis, Tennessee. If you need to get a hold of them, go ahead and call the Nesvik main office, and they will get you in touch with Mr. Mike. We will put this out. I think I'm going to put this out to the general public. Normally, this is for premium subscribers only. And starting at the beginning of the year, these will be for premium subscribers only and clients of MBS. This is the premium content right here. www.agbull.com, $25 a month, $250 a year. But for Christmas, because I love agriculture and I know you love agriculture, we're going to give this one out for free. So I will release this out on the interweb later today. Mr. Mike Sands, I'll read these. Monthly feedlot placements continue to shrink. Annual feedlot placements historically small. Beef cow herd transitioning from contraction to slow growth. I'm looking through my bifocals, by the way. Long day feedlot inventory less burdensome than perceived. Mexican border situation uncertain. Dot dot dot. For those of you just listening to the podcast, important volumes likely much smaller. May never get back to last year's levels. Ooh, that's a big one. Okay, should I go to slide one?
Yeah, let's start out there, Tommy. And this is
Okay.
just a kind of a quick recap of these placement numbers. USDA, of course, will come with a cattle on feed report tomorrow afternoon. And it looks like November placements are going to be down somewhere in the area of 7 to 8%. That's a historically small number. There's only been one other time where it's been smaller than that. But for the most part, it's an extension of what we've seen for the last several months. We go all the way back to May, for example. Placements of every month since then have averaged about 8% below a year ago levels. And at least from an overall perspective, it does not look to me like the November data is going to interrupt that string. It's going to fit right in with other months in recent history. And at least the early indications through 2.5 or 3 weeks of December, it looks like these placement patterns just continue to erode. I
Mhm.
think that sets the stage for tighter fed cattle supplies as we move into next year. So if you go to the next one, Tommy, that's kind of an annual summary of these feedlot placements. It looks like for this calendar year, total numbers moved into the feed yard this year are going to be almost 1,000,004, smaller than last year. And at least the early indications would suggest that we may see another 700,000 head drop next year as well. So this year would be the second smallest on record, and next year's placement numbers could, in fact, be record small. Now, we got a long ways to go to get through next year's data, obviously. But we have been looking at smaller U.S. calf crops in recent years, and that has tightened up domestic feeder cattle production and supplies, along with, in all likelihood, some increased heifer retention beginning this year, but probably picking up steam a little bit next year and maybe the year after as well. And last but not least, obviously, the Mexican border closure has significantly reduced feeder cattle supplies in that southern plains cattle feeding area. All of this taken together, I think, paints a picture for tighter fed cattle supplies next year. We talked about this year's total feedlot placements being down 1,000,004. If you just look at July through December, feedlot placements are
Hmm.
down pretty close to 800,000 head.
Wow.
You can't look at those numbers and not come away, I don't think, without an expectation that next year's fed cattle supplies are going to be even tighter than this year. So I'm not convinced yet, Tommy, that we have seen our tightest fed beef production from a cyclical standpoint.
So we could, the only way that prices really go down hard is if demand goes down hard. It's not that the supply is going to go up high.
I think that's exactly right. That the overall supply picture still looks really pretty supportive. Obviously, there are always demand questions, but for calendar 25, overall beef demand is simply been pretty darn stellar. And at least at this point, certainly there is some risk going forward that demand could erode. I don't think it's going to grow as much in 26 as it did in 25, but by the same token, I'm a little bit hesitant to argue that demand is going to be significantly weaker. So let's call demand steady.
Hmm.
With a tighter supply, that does not necessarily argue for substantially lower fed cattle prices.
Hmm. And as far as box beef or the cuts coming in from Brazil or Argentina, you think the Argentina headline was BS, right? We're going to get 4 times more. We were barely getting any from them anyway, right, Mike?
That's right. Four times a small number, still a pretty small number.
Right,
So,
right.
from Argentina's standpoint, I don't think they are a huge threat to the U.S. supply. Brazil potentially could be a little
Hmm.
bit different story. Overall imports this year will be up somewhere in the area of 15 to 20% compared with last year. Next year's growth, since worldwide cattle numbers are shrinking, I think next year's growth in imports might be closer to, say, maybe 5 to 8% larger.
Hmm.
So, y- to your point, we're probably not going to get covered up with imports.
Okay, I'm gonna throw out something crazy out there, and you could tell me I'm crazy. It's not my idea. If I had a client call me today and say that there's a possibility that Trump administration will pay people in the dairy industry money to liquidate animals and turn that into beef, is that you're laughing?
Mm, Yeah, we've been through some dairy buyouts in the past. The
Have
most,
we've had those before, Mike?
oh yes,
Oh, do tell because
um,
I'm just young and stupid.
there was
Now
a
I'm old
dairy
and stupid.
there was a dairy buyout in 1984
Oh,
that was
Jesus.
Uh, obviously a long time ago, but it was catastrophic. It was
Really?
announced on Good Friday afternoon that year. The markets were closed, and the total buyout was supposed to be, if I remember correctly, something like 1,600,000 or 1,700,000
Hmm.
over a relatively short period of time. Well, when the market opened on Monday, it just absolutely cratered as a result of that announcement. So, first of all, I don't think uh, I would agree at this point that there's a very likelihood of a dairy buyout, and certainly not a repeat of what we saw in that um, debacle, if you will. Um, in all likelihood, it would be more reminiscent, and I'd have to go back and check, Tommy,
Hmm.
but I think maybe something on the order of 10 or 15 years ago, 10 years
Okay.
ago.
Maybe we could
Uh,
talk about that tomorrow on the Nesvik call, just
okay.
because there's a
There
lot of
was
young people who have no clue what you're talking about.
there was an industry funded buyout program at that point, and it was financed through the dairy checkoff program, and
Hmm.
it was staged in three phases on much smaller volume. So If we're going to have a buyout, chances are pretty good it's going to be really small, phased over time, and not a huge market mover.
hmm And the reason I say that is I didn't listen to Trump's speech last night, but I guess he didn't say a whole lot that he doesn't say in his normal day-to-day comments, except for the 1776 money to the to the people serving, and we thank all those who serve. So pretty much, he got every TV channel in America to cover him, um, to not say a whole lot more. But the reason he probably had that, they said, these are they like the contributors on CNBC. I always, when my dad talks, he's like they. I go, who the hell are these they people? He'll say they. I'm like, who's they? They, the CNBC contributors, said that he did the Republicans did very bad during midterm elections, and the number one thing that's upsetting people is affordability. And he talked about $200 billion, which would be 1/5 of a trillion, if my math's correct, coming in from tariffs. But we paid the tax on the tariff because everything we're buying went up. So the Americans paid the tariff, and now we're being told this is a great thing. Now, you don't have to comment, but that's just what they said, which gets me back to the beef. He's got to make it look like to the consumer that he's getting everything down, hence $55 crude oil. If you go fill up your car today, it's probably like 255 gas. That will get people driving again, won't it?
Absolutely, it will. And I know that beef has kind of become the poster boy for high food costs, much like eggs were a year or two ago. But in the overall scheme of things, affordability could be much easier addressed, in my opinion, by eliminating the tariffs in the first place.
Hmm
In addition to that, reducing the tariffs or eliminating those on steel, aluminum, and lumber, which affect obviously a good bit of our manufacturing costs. And in addition to that, addressing high utility bills and insurance costs, whether it's health insurance or your homeowner's insurance. All of those will have a much bigger impact on affordability than griping about cyclically dominated high beef prices.
Mike Sands for president. I got the American flag. Holy moly. You are wound up today. You are cranky and have an opinion. You would be young. If you were president, you'd be young.
Oh no, I'm about the same age as he is. So
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Let's get back to the show. The last chart before I ask you that crazy question about the dairy, which I'm going to learn a lot from you on history and Google a couple things, was these things have happened before. When they happened and the pits opened, it looked like this. Things went crazy down, but the overall effect was not maybe what we were looking for, right? Or what
ab-
they were looking for.
absolutely correct.
Okay, this is the fourth slide you sent. Large decline in beef cow slaughter, culling, herd growth.
Yep. The culling rates, as far as the beef industry are concerned, are down pretty substantially. You can, if you look at that black line running across the top, go
Mm-hmm.
back to 2022. The culling
2022.
rate was something in excess of 13% of the January 1 inventory. That resulted in a record cow kill that year. And obviously, we ended up reducing the size of the cow herd. For this year, you see that little black box there
Mm-hmm.
is around 8.5%. So beef cow slaughter this year will be down something like 17% from last year, and it's 40% below where we were in 2022.
And
This
explain to me,
cutback,
Mike, why is the black box there? I see the black box now.
that's the forecast culling rate for the beef cow herd this year. Now you
Got it.
see that blue area running
Mm-hmm.
across the chart there. That's kind of the 9 to 10% culling rate. That's kind of my benchmark. If we get into that area or lower, a lot of times it's an indicator that the industry is poised to expand. And that's where I believe 2025 will go down. We are making the transition from contraction to slow expansion. Now, people want to use or talk about the kind of dramatic expansion that we saw in 2014 and 15 this year is not any way comparable to the kind of growth rates that we saw back at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue that January 1 beef cow herd may be up somewhere in the area of 300, 350,000 head, somewhere in that area, but it's starting from a really small number. So the end result is this is just a transition. In all likelihood, we have further growth yet ahead of us, but it's much, much slower than what we saw in 2014 and 15.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you another silly question? Today on our Squawk Box internal, you guys were joking about the 1,000 pound weight. Tell us about that. You're laughing. Yeah. What?
Well, if you go back a few years, and maybe it's more than a few now, but overall marketing weights on fed cattle were 1,100, 1,250 pounds live weight.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant the carcass weights were something, between 8 and 900 pounds, maybe a little bit over 900 pounds. But that was pretty typical. Now we're talking about live weights that might range anywhere from 1,500 to 1,700 pounds, and carcass weights somewhere in the area of 900 to 1,000 pounds, and getting bigger. So we're talking about carcass weights now
Mm-hmm.
that are as high as our live weights were a few years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
our production per animal is substantially bigger than it was a number of years ago.
So if these boys and girls had to buy a seat on Southwest Airlines, they might need 4 seats instead of 2 or 3. They're going through the
Absolutely right.
same thing the airline industry's going through. Is holy cow, are our passengers getting bigger? We should charge them a gas surcharge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's another indication that um, the application of technology and feeding technology in the cattle feeding business here in the U.S. gets us more production per animal than we've ever seen historically. So the industry has gotten considerably more efficient. We're getting more beef produced per cow, beef produced per fed animal, and we're doing it essentially with less resources.
Hmm. Um, yeah, that's interesting. Now, let's go slide 5 and
Yeah, this is the one that kind of gets at that whole question.
what I just
Um,
asked.
yes, sir.
Oh, I look
Good,
smart now. All right, go
great
ahead.
lead in, Tommy.
That
Uh,
was by accident, everyone. That was
I
by accident.
I think the structure of cattle feeding has changed dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years. Part of it is genetics with regard to the cow herd. Part of it is economics. Part of it is feeding technology and management. But all of those things taken together has facilitated much heavier, much longer feeding periods in the feed yard and much heavier carcass weights. And for the most part, they have been pretty well accepted as far as the packing and retail industries are concerned. So even though weights are historically heavy, uh, we really haven't seen or felt a whole lot of pushback from the feeding industry. Now, why is this important in terms of overall cattle feeding? One of the things that we've talked about a lot over the last 2 or 3 months is this
Hmm.
front end cattle supply. We've put few cattle on feed. We haven't marketed very many. And as a result, this front end supply of cattle, and that's the blue line that you see running
Hmm.
across the top of the chart. It's a calculated number of cattle on feed over 150 days. And you can see over the last 4 months, September, October, November, and December, those are historically high numbers. Generated a lot of discussion with that red box that you see there. That number calculated number, 1st of December, is 600,000 head bigger than last year. Well, that sounds like a real problem if you've got a lot of long day cattle on feed and record heavy carcass weights to go along with it.
Mhm.
Doesn't leave the cattle feeder with much leverage. That's been a contributor, I think, to some of the weakness that we saw back in November and the early part of December in terms of cash prices. But I'm also going to argue that that 600,000 calculation is way more pessimistic than what I think the real situation is in the feed yard. If you see that blue line running across there, those on feed numbers over 150 days increased counter seasonally in September, October, and November. Let's say, given the change in the feeding structure that we just talked about, let's say that we had seen kind of a seasonal change. We know over time that on feeding regimes have increased. We've gone from 150 days to 180 days, and in some cases, maybe 190 or 200 days. Let's say we saw a seasonal change in that on feed inventory over 150 days. That's the brown line that you see running across there. Doesn't look nearly as ominous as the blue line. And as of December 1, that on feed, long day on feed inventory is only about 150,000 head bigger than last year. December slaughter has been much more aggressive than what we had seen in October and November. And the end result is we've probably put a huge dent in that 150,000 head estimate. My point is that uh, this long day cattle inventory is less ominous than what many of the calculations and perceptions would suggest.
Okay. See if we have one more slide. What's this
Yeah,
one?
this is the last one. We're probably going to talk about this whole thing more going forward. It's the number of feeder cattle imported from Mexico on an annual basis. You can see in recent years that number has ranged anywhere from say 1 million to 1,000,004.
Mhm.
In the last 2 years, 23 and 24, we brought in 1,000,002 or a little bit better each
Mhm.
year. This year, for a short period of time back in the spring, we brought in about 225,000. So that's it for this year. The perception seems to be that when, and that's highly uncertain, the border reopens, that there's this massive supply of feeder cattle that's going to be heading north. And my point is that that border has now effectively been closed for 13 months. So if you're a Mexican cattleman, you have made other arrangements to accommodate that inventory. Uh, we believe, first of all, that the Mexican cattle herd at the beginning of the year was somewhat smaller than a year ago because of the drought in the northern states of Mexico, Chihuahua and Sonora, that have been affected much like Arizona and Texas. So the cow herd, first of all, and the resulting calf crop were smaller than a year ago. In addition to that, after 13 months, I would guess that the Mexican cattle feeding industry has ramped up and cattlemen in Mexico have made other arrangements rather than shipping feeder cattle to the north. So the end result may be that potential supply might be half of what it was historically. 500,000, that's just a guess on my part.
Mhm.
But my point is, it's dramatically smaller than what we've done historically. And it looks to me, based on the amount of corn and grain sorghum that is being shipped to Mexico, they are ramping up their feeding industry to the point where we may not get back to 1,000,002 anytime soon in terms of feeder cattle imports. In fact, it's possible that we never get back to that point. and we end up feeding considerably more cattle in Mexico and see beef shipped to the US rather
Hmm.
than feeder cattle.
And hence why you said every day this goes on, we're teaching the Mexicans how to be in our business, just like we taught the Brazilians how to grow soybeans, correct?
Absolutely.
And
I
just
think
unless someone's been sleeping under a rock, the Brazilians are absolutely kicking our ass when it comes to growing soybeans. We sent them our seed, our tractors, our technology, our knowledge. They tore down the rainforests, and they are not backing off.
that's exactly right. And I think to some extent we are making some of the same steps with regard to the beef industry that we did 20 or 30 years ago in the soybean industry.
Yeah. Real quick, everyone, if you're watching this, I want to thank you for subscribing to the Agbo podcast. Please click on if you're listening this on YouTube or if you're listening this on Spotify or Apple, you probably want to go watch it on YouTube because it was very, very chart specific. Mike does a great job. For those of you who don't know Mike, or if this is your first episode, I know because of our partnership with Jim Wiesmeyer, who Mike worked with for many years. Mike, just go tell people one more time about yourself because we got some new subscribers.
Grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin years and years ago. Migrated to the cattle industry across the Midwest. Spent about 30 years or fairly close to it with Sparks companies. And over the last 7 or 8 years, have been a part of the Nesvik Trading Group. So that's kind of my background. Spent a career as a livestock and meat market analyst, mostly associated with the cattle and beef industry in recent years.
Very good. Well, you are an absolute expert. And it took you how many years to get good at your job? 78, 79,
Well, I'm
right?
still working on it, Tommy. It's this is just a work
2026
in
is your
progress.
year. You're going to get good at this. We believe in you. All right. I'm learning a lot. Folks, we're going to do a video. I was out to dinner with Mike last week and I said, we're going to do a cattle video for dummies. And these guys speak their own language. And Mike's like, I don't know. And I go, all right, how many different names are there just for a type of cattle? He's like, well, when they're this weight, they're called this, and when they're this, they're that, and then this and that. And 99% of the people have no clue what you guys are talking about. But you've done it for so long, you just think we all understand. So we're gonna do a little series, Cattle Talk for Dummies, and it'll be fun. And I know I'll learn a lot. All
Sounds
right.
good, Tommy. Looking
Y-
forward to it.
You are in charge. Tomorrow's the Nesvik Christmas party. You are the only adult in that room, so you are in charge. I want to hear some reports, okay?
I am not in charge of anything associated with that. I am a participant, but not in charge.
Very well. That's right off the Bill Clinton playbook. I did not inhale. Mike Sants,
There you go.
MBS Research. Thank you, my friend. I love doing these videos with you.
Good to visit with you, Tommy, and Merry Christmas.
Same to you.